Join us on Path of Faith, where we delve deep into the heart of spirituality, offering insights and inspiration to illuminate your path towards a deeper connection with God. Father Fabio, I've wanted to write to you for a long time. Here's the situation. I lost my oldest son, who was 30 years old, in a motorcycle accident. And since then, I haven't been living as a person anymore. I have depression, and life has lost its meaning for me. I also know that your mother lost a daughter in a very tragic accident. I would like you to help me. Please, give me an answer that can ease my anguish. I know that many other people also go through this difficulty, right? You didn't mention how long you've lived with this experience. I don't know how long ago the accident with your son happened. I'll speak from the experience I saw in my own home. The death of my sister was very tragic for all of us. It's not easy to lose. My mother, especially, lost a daughter at 29. Years old, full of life, beautiful, full of projects, with a son to raise. And suddenly, we received the news of her death. Perhaps one of the most painful moments my family has had to face to this day. I remember when I found my mother. As soon as I arrived, I was living in Taraboa at the time. I traveled all day to get there, received the news in the morning, and managed to get to my mother's house that night. And I remember that I found a woman extremely distressed. Of course, it's natural for it to be like that. My mother was devastated, poor thing. But I noticed that in that woman's hands was a small object. It was a rosary, very small, which she held from the moment she heard the news of my sister's death. What I saw immediately after was a harsh suffering, really harsh. I witnessed many terrible situations involving my mother's pain. My mother had to go to Belo Horizonte soon after, where my sister lived. Her apartment was closed. After the accident, my mother had to go there, collect her things, store everything. And I realized that watching my mother face all that, I discovered something. No one dies all at once. The accident happens one day, and for a long time, we have to give ourselves this news. I saw this in myself too. And what did I experience from this pain? That when we lose someone in such a tragic way, we need to give ourselves this news every day. Because interestingly, it's not that it hurts more or less, it's that we are less prepared, right? If you follow a person's illness, you follow that process. There comes a time when the family almost wishes that person would stop suffering. But not in this case. When someone is abruptly taken from our lives, like your son was, like my sister was, like so many other stories, like what has happened in so many families where children were drastically taken from their homes, from their families, because of accidents, died, and suddenly are no longer there, we find that we will organize the mourning every day. There's no way around it. Every day I woke up and felt the impact of that terrible news. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night. I cried a lot because my sister left a huge void in my life. Time changes the way we feel it. But it was very hard, very hard. And I remember that my mother went through the same process. She talked about the struggle it was for her to face that house without my sister's presence, to live through that painful process of going to the apartment where she lived, organizing her things, arranging everything so that life could go on. In my mother's organization of her grief, God was present the whole time. You know, I think that scene I saw on the day of my sister's death, my mother holding that rosary, a symbol of faith, was, for me, like seeing the result of faith in a person's life. Not once did I see my mother blaspheming. Not once did I see my mother rebelling against God, even though I think that is also natural. If you have blasphemed, if you are angry with God, don't blame yourself for it. I think this process is natural, right? I repeat, every day we give ourselves the news. Every day you need to tell yourself, my son is dead. And the reactions will be different because the human heart is dynamic. We cannot expect the same response. One day you will be a little angrier, one day you will be calmer, One day you will be, I don't know, lighter. One day it will be heavier. What we cannot lose sight of is that from the moment the loss happens, it is our responsibility, with those who remain, to guide our grief in the right way. It has to be honest. I cannot, from a loss, make my life and the lives of those around me unworkable. By the way, my people, I keep thinking that we only recover because of others. We have to take a back seat. But when we look at those who remain, and for my mother, for her to recover from my sister's death, it was essential that she could look at Conrado, my sister's son, who remained and who my mother needed to finish raising. And my mother saw in that boy a reason to live. So we need to discover what the other left us, what my son left me. That can be a starting point for my recovery. My people, there are no magic formulas. What worked for my mother may not work for you, but what worked for her may work for you. I'm not saying it's a rule that all mothers will face loss in the same way. What I'm saying is that there are elements that are the same in the organization of grief. This is what psychology teaches us. Every time we lose someone, when we need to deal with the absence of someone, we have to find a starting point that can help us resume life. And usually this starting point is directly linked to the life of the one who left. Now, my dear, the process is yours. The struggle is yours. We want to help you. We want, with this word, perhaps to put a new meaning in your life. But I am sure that if you seek to go without God, He will not abandon you. My mother is a woman who teaches me this all the time. God is part of my mother's life. All the time she talks about Him, she lives from Him. All her hopes are placed in Him. Pray about your pain, without magic formulas, without ready-made formulas. Tell God everything that is in your heart. Talk about your grief, your despair, your difficulty in accepting this fact. I'm sure God will not leave you helpless. I'm sure God will give you the necessary comfort. And gradually, through your own effort as well, coupled with divine grace, you will have the grace to find the path to joy again. You may never be the woman you were before your son's passing, but who knows? You might be better because of the suffering you've experienced. I always hear this: Father, I will never be the same person again, but let this new person who is emerging be better than the one who was there before. I believe that no one should die in vain. Such suffering cannot be in vain. If it visited my life, I want it to leave me with a great lesson. If it hurt me, if it makes me cry, I want it to generate within me a lesson, a maturity. That's what we need to ask God for every day. That our suffering is not in vain. That when it passes through us, it provokes in me, in you, a new person, but a better person, so that we may have the grace to say, after that pain, I was never the same, but for the better. So there are people, for example, I know a mother who had a son brutally murdered, who lost his life brutally. And after her son's death, she had to create a group. She had a collective therapy group of mothers who lost their children in the same way. Of course, well managed, these groups do a lot of good because we know that every time we have the opportunity to share our pain with someone who experiences similar pain, we feel more understood. Because one of the major factors that generate loneliness is realizing that others do not know how to feel as we feel and are not interested in making an effort to feel. It's interesting that there is a statistic about couples who, after the loss of a child, go through very serious marital crises. And in many cases, there is separation. The child dies, and the marriage that was great, that was fine, suddenly goes into crisis, and the couples separate. Why? Because there is a very big difference in the way men and women deal with pain. The man feels the same. He deeply feels the pain of losing a child, but it is very different from the way the woman feels. The man has an easier time resuming life, starting over. So the woman often sees this as an affront to the pain she feels. That is why many couples, after losing their children, need psychological and therapeutic support so that the marriage does not go into crisis, because we know There's a very high tendency for separation due to a different way of understanding the same pain. No doubt, it's very good when we know that the other is feeling with us. This causes closeness, but it also generates division when you insist or realize that the other is not feeling with the same intensity. So, we need help. It's been a pleasure having you with us on Path of Faith. We value your feedback, so please share your thoughts in the comments, give us a thumbs up, share this video with others, and hit the subscribe button to stay connected with us.